Can the common person really make a difference? Does your voice, your vote, even really matter? What happens when your eyes are open and you see the world as it truly is? How will you cope with losing your innocence? Many of us have experienced that moment when our worldview is shattered. Our boxed-in beliefs become battered prison cell walls that confine us to pale imitations of what we once believed to be true. But when those pieces are deconstructed and demolished, will we find something in the rubble to hold on to? Can anything of value be rescued, restored, and rebuilt into something new? On today's episode of the Live a Meaningful Story podcast, we begin our November series centered on everyone's favorite family dinner conversation, politics. Yeah. And to kick things off, we're diving into one of the most controversial films ever released, Frank Capra's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Upon its 1939 debut, the U.S. government disowned it for its pioneering portrayal of fallible, corrupt government officials. But despite the controversies, Mr. Smith was still nominated for 11 Academy Awards, winning the Oscar for Best Original Story. And overseas, this was the last film that French cinemas chose to play in theaters before Nazis invaded their country and banned the film. At the time we're recording this, we don't know who's going to win the 2024 election. And chances are that by now, the votes have been cast and the results are in. But regardless of the outcome, the film is just as relevant today as it was 85 years ago. How do we reconcile an aspirational figure like Mr. Smith with our own realism and cynicism? In the words of Frank Capra's son, in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Capra takes his naive hero into America's corridors of power to show how innocence and belief have a power all their own. Welcome to the Live a Meaningful Story podcast, where we analyze stories and films that help us make sense of life. We are four friends with backgrounds in storytelling, filmmaking, teaching, and narrative therapy. Join us on our quest towards telling and living our stories more meaningfully. I'm Derrick Hatch.
My name is Nick Natal.
Hello, everybody. I'm Joseph Wilson.
I'm Jason Lin.
All right, guys, we are here in politics land.
Politics.
I love that the four films that we have for this series all tackle, we all interpreted what politics means differently, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm really excited that these are going to be very macro, big picture films, and we've also got micro, very specific topics within politics as well that we're going to dive into.
Yeah.
So I first saw this film. I saw a clip of it in government class in high school as they were trying to help us understand the process of how a bill becomes law. Mm-hmm. You know, kind of like beyond like the school.
I was going to say, they didn't show you Schoolhouse Rock?
They did in middle school, but now in high school we got this.
Yes, I'm only a bill.
I just remember conjunction.
What's your function?
I played it to my kids like yesterday.
I'm a grown man and I know that.
Yeah. You know your conjunctions.
Yeah, good job. A lot of great films I found actually in school with teachers just showing clips. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. So that's when I first saw this film. I asked my teacher if I could borrow the DVD and take it home and watched it. And so I think all of you guys, this was your first time ever seeing it. So what were your initial first impressions?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was a little personal. It ended up.
I wonder why.
It's like, what are they talking about? This is me in the movie. And then they said,
we were texting about that before Jason saw it.
We found this boys crew leader, this scouts leader, and he knows all the wildlife and all the rocks and trees.
This is literally Jason having his own little Boy Scouts thing going to the Capitol.
Yeah, there's this. He's an earnest dude, but he's a little dopey, and this dude sees one thing that interests him and immediately just disappears for hours to go find and go, oh, that's cool. And
that might be one of the most Jason moments is like, he would dip out.
And even
his suitcase, leaving his items behind. What are you doing, bro?
And a cage full of birds.
Yep, a cage full of birds.
Oh,
bro.
they're pigeons. The first one that makes it home, I'm gonna send it into the Nationals.
We're trying to have a conversation about writing down what this bill is gonna be. What does your name mean? What's your full name? All right, we gotta get back into it. Yeah, it's literally phone book.
Oh, let's wait. You have an idea? Well, let's just do it now.
Yeah,
let's just do it now. Yeah, tonight. No, but here's the process. Okay.
Jason, this could be your I am the protagonist moment.
This honestly,
Baby, dang it. Y'all took it from me.
that was today. But
Yeah.
But did you like that? Like, did you like kind of seeing yourself in it? Like, what were you?
Selfishly, it was boring at first, the movie. And I was like, I can't follow this. I don't.
I didn't follow any of what you guys said. I missed
Fancy.
it.
Oh, you did.
Yeah, I got hooked when they were talking about the bill. Then the conversation slowed down, and then these two characters were interacting. I was like, okay.
So the beginning.
No, I have no idea what happened.
That's
the first 20 minutes. And I was trying to watch.
The politics can kind of go over my head as less as I'd like to admit that. I don't know how to say that properly. But when it became, oh, look, it's you in this situation.
Yeah.
Like, yep, here you are. Now what do you do? I was like, wow, I really relate because I would have no clue. Oh, you're a senator now. Well,
Yep.
Yeah.
well, what do I do? I'll let you know what to do. And I'm just like, I don't know anything.
This is your role
As
now.
as much like heart I'd have for it. And yeah, I'd like to do a great job for our country and all that. I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
And no one wants to tell me. So where the heck do I go in this? And I just start kind of figuring it out.
Joe, what were your thoughts?
This was also my first time watching it. I watched it with Nancy. I watched pretty much all of these with Nancy. We were kind of struggling in the first half. I liked it more than she did in the first half, but the second half, they got us coach. Pretty much after when he went to the Lincoln Memorial.
Yes, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah,
For the first time?
Yes, for the first time. I really, really liked that scene just because what it showed, like, within that scene.
Yes.
Not just what he was talking about, but we'll get to it. But
Yeah.
I really liked it. Yeah, I really like this movie. It was fun seeing Jason in this situation. So yeah.
Yeah. So I chose this movie because I wanted to kind of throw a curveball in the podcast a little bit. I think a lot of the stuff we've been doing has been a bit on the darker side, and it has been a bit more contemporary, like 80s or later. So I did want to kind of go back to what were we saying about politics long time before, before even like World War II and the Cold War and the 60s revolution, right? Before all these major things happened, what were we saying back then? There's an interesting tension in this film between the ideal versus the real, and talking about this idea of aspirational figures, aspirational protagonists. And so, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and read the Letterboxd, and then we'll kind of start to dive into this.
Letterboxd.
Romance, drama, laughter, and heartbreak, created out of the very heart and soil of America. Naive and idealistic Jefferson Smith, leader of the Boy Rangers, is appointed to the United States Senate by the puppet governor of his state. He soon discovers, upon going to Washington, many shortcomings of the political process, as his earnest goal of a national boys' camp leads to a conflict with the state political boss.
I need more pictures of Spider-Man.
I was trying to sound like the guy on the radio near the end of the movie who's like, he's been talking for 23 hours. That guy there. So I want to give some context about Frank Capra real quick.
Sick.
Frank Capra is a really interesting guy. I've really learned a lot about him in researching for this film.
Context. Your name could be Context.
Context. Yeah, I like that.
Because I know nothing about Spike Lee, and I would be like, Context, what is it?
Yeah.
I think it could be
Oh,
Context.
okay.
Even earlier,
that might
when-
stick
when
better than Wiki.
Context, or
Than Wiki.
later.
Context.
Phone book, Context.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We'll try it out today. Context.
I feel it.
So Frank Capra had a complex relationship with the American dream, with that whole idea of, you come here, you work hard, and you'll make it, right? Because he came to America when he was 6 years old. In fact, I was at Ellis Island just a few months ago on a trip to New York, and I actually found Frank Capra's his papers there, which was really awesome. They have them like on display. So every film that he was making with Columbia, I think, was building to this moment with Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. As he's developing this film, it's during the Great Depression, and Capra believed that the Great Depression and the dawning of World War II was bringing the American dream to an end, as it was. And so the question he was asking was, what is there left to hold on to when the American dream is shattered, when that myth doesn't work anymore? And during this time, he was experiencing a lot of depression. In fact, he was so depressed he had to be hospitalized because it was starting to deteriorate his body.
Jeez.
And so a lot of what he expressed that he was really struggling with was he could not handle the burden of success. The fact that he was making money, getting all these accolades as a film director, and the common man was struggling. So he really wanted to dedicate every film he made to telling the common man's story. And he, was a common man himself, where he kind of came from. He didn't grow up in privilege. He's a devout Catholic. He's just, he was married. He had a wife and kids. He is one of the most conventional, people on paper, when you look at his story. That's the kind of life he wanted to live. He lived out on a farm, every time between he was making films, he just liked to grow crops and stuff. So he's just very much wanted to be that ordinary guy and really live into that narrative.
Everyman. Yeah.
The everyman. Yes, exactly. When this film came out in 1939, this is the final film he makes with Columbia. When this film comes out, it's his last kind of pitch of here's what I think we have that we can hold on to. He knows America, the war is coming. He knows that this change is on the horizon. And so when he did the premiere of this film, and I think one of the most savage moves in movie premiere history, he invites the entire United States Senate and Congress to the premiere of the film to be the audience.
All the respect for it.
That's the only audience? It's just the Congress?
No, I mean, there's the usual people who premiere, families and stuff. But those are the guests of honor. Yeah. Those are the guests of honor for the premiere. So he gets
Tarantino.
So he gets he gets the Senate floor to watch the movie, and the outrage was explosive.
Let's go.
Absolutely explosive. It was so bad that all the other studios at the time, Warner Brothers, Paramount, all the other studios tried to buy the original negative film from Henry Cohn at Columbia and say, we will buy it from you so we can burn it. This film can never be seen by the public. And I gotta say, I gotta give
buy
props.
it so we can get rid of it.
Yes, they all were in a bidding war to get rid of it. But then Harry Cohn had to come out and say, this film is not for sale. Mm-hmm. And I think in Columbia, back when they had balls as a studio, they said, no, we stand by this film, we stand by Capra, and the American people will see it.
That's cool.
So the government was putting out a campaign, as you see in the film. Mm-hmm. The U.S. government was putting out a smear campaign through the media of Capra and the film. The other studios were discrediting it.
This is literally what's happening in the movie to Smith.
Yes.
I may just say Jason, to be honest. So
yes.
That's literally what's happening to him. The media slandering him, the government is slandering him, all of it.
Yes.
That's cool.
But when the film came out, the people loved it. Mm-hmm. They flocked to it.
People are the children.
That's the only reason why I think it got all those Oscar nominations is not because of critics and because of the establishment, but because the common person. And keep in mind, 1939, this is a big deal. But listen to what else came out this year, because this is a big year for film. In 1939, there was Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz, Stagecoach, Mr. Smith. 4 of the most important films of all time came out this year.
That's crazy.
That's intense.
And this is the year, I personally believe this is the year between The Wizard of Oz and Mr. Smith. This is the year where the audience started to, their voice became more important than just the establishment.
What people are wanting now is authenticity. Mm-hmm. And what they wanted then was a voice.
Yeah.
So it's still pretty much the same thing today.
In a different form.
A different form,
it's the same thing in a different form.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They wanted to, Capra's big thing with all his movies was I want people to go to the theater and see themselves on screen, which is a big deal because a lot of actors, if you watch a lot of films from the 1930s, it's a lot of overacting. It's a lot of, we're putting on a play, right? That was the mentality for a lot of actors, was we're putting on a play.
Yeah.
And Frank Capra is I want you to act like a normal person. Mm-hmm. And that's why he casts people like Gene Arthur is in every Frank Capra film from the 1930s, I think.
Oh, that's funny.
Maybe besides Lost Horizon, but she's in all of them. He chooses the same actors.
The secretary one?
Yeah. So he chooses these actors who can embody real people and not be super over the top. So when you watch his films, they really stand in contrast to everything else that was coming out at the time. And he's also, I believe, the first director, when you watch the opening credits of his films, It doesn't say directed. It doesn't just say directed by Frank. It says Frank Capra's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
I didn't even notice that.
So it was really important that he branded himself as an auteur director intentionally. Like he wanted to know, like, these are my movies.
Yeah.
This is my voice. And there's a quote in the book that's in that box set that you're looking at, Nick, where he says that everything in my movies, despite being a collaboration, is my voice, my idea. So
because he's free. So the
Yes.
idea that they wanted a voice then and we want authenticity now is that we're all looking for freedom, I think.
yeah. So anyway, let's get into the first part of the movie. So the first part of the movie you guys said was a struggle for you guys, right?
It was a bit longer
tough.
than I would.
Also trying to like
lot of fast
understand
talking.
the
Yeah.
scheme of
what's
what would
going
really
on.
happen with the graft. They've been buying up all the land around where they were going to build the dam.
Yeah,
right?
I didn't
Yes.
really
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
understand it until she pretty much said, "Hey, they're going to be having that land for
Right.
them." I did enjoy like all the boys like convincing their dad to get Mr. Smith to do
Oh yeah, the governor.
Exactly, but that's the normal people. That's the people that wanted a voice,
Mhm.
and they're picking someone who is authentic and can share that voice. But little do they know, their father, their leader, is corrupt.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, all the congressmen are like fat, like every single one of them. I think besides Joseph, that's
Yeah.
the one. Yeah, all of them are fat. No, but it shows to
Yeah.
they're the ones really consuming, getting
Yes.
all that.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Smith stands out, right?
Yeah.
As this kind of skinny, tall, twitch.
Exactly.
Straight,
Straight,
Yeah.
straight up.
Yeah.
All right.
Great posture.
not bending.
So
Spit it.
So the claim is that this is part of a graft scheme, and
Yeah.
I can define it for you guys real quick. And
Yeah,
for
go
the
ahead.
listeners. So graft, as understood in American English, is a form of political corruption defined as the unscrupulous use of a politician's authority for personal gain.
Mm.
Political graft occurs when funds intended for public projects, i.e. the deficiency bill,
Yeah.
and the dam, when funds intended for public projects are intentionally misdirected in order to maximize the benefits to private interest.
There you go.
So they said that in the beginning they were buying up land all around the dam area under like dummy holdings or dummy corporations, companies that were really owned by them.
Yeah.
So
Well, and they choose Mr. Smith because they want someone that won't ask questions or talk out of turn. They want someone who's old-fashioned, patriotic, and they see those things as weak and naive.
Little do they know.
Little do they know. Well, Mr. Smith is he's
picked the
the
wrong one.
idealist archetype, also known as the innocent. It seems like he's the everyman at first, but I'm going to argue he is not the everyman
Who, Smith?
archetype. I do not think he is the everyman.
he's for the everyman.
He is for the everyman, but I do not think he is the I think he's a stand-in for Capra because Capra is not. He is the everyman, but he's
Yeah.
also not, right? But I do think somebody else is the everyman archetype. And
That's
Saunders.
I think it's Saunders, yes. But I do think that when Mr. Smith, when we first see him in that conversation with Senator Payne, and he says, he has that conversation about his father, and he kind of is alluding to the fact that his father was killed for speaking the truth.
Yeah, I was locked in on that.
Yeah.
Yes. And so he makes the one of the most famous quotes from the movie is he says, the only causes worth fighting for are the lost causes.
Oh man, I knew how this was gonna end when I heard this.
Yeah, that quote really shows you this is that movie.
Yeah.
That is in one sentence the whole movie.
Well,
Exactly.
Burn the guy down.
Yeah.
We'll get there, but man, that movie.
Yeah.
I was like almost in tears at the end of this movie.
Yeah.
You know what kind of reminds me of?
Yeah.
The line from Captain America Civil War where she's like, if someone is telling you to move, you be that immovable object. And you say no. You plant your feet, you say no, you move.
I would argue that Captain America is almost like created in the image of a Mr. Smith
Yeah,
type
definitely.
of, especially with his whole arc in the MCU.
Jason, I can't like you anymore. You inspire.
You represent-
Yeah, you
Same.
represent Captain.
If so, technically I came first, and Captain America was just a caricature of what they thought I.
No, that's your worst. So you're so
So you're trying to fit me in this small Captain America box. Shame
Yeah.
on you for not being able to see beyond that.
I don't. We're not in the podcast about the glasses yet.
Oh.
So Mr. Smith,
You'll learn.
as we mentioned earlier, he ditches his duties to go take a tourist trip
See the
around
dome.
Washington, D.C. Yeah, which is awesome. Like
Yeah.
I get that same giddiness when I go to a new place. I'm like, let's just go. Like, let's just drop everything in the hotel and go.
Drop everything.
So
Literally.
there's a scene that you mentioned, Joe, where he's going to the Lincoln Memorial the first time he goes there. And there's a way that Capra frames the shot to where Mr. Smith is this small, really seemingly insignificant man amongst a bunch of small, insignificant people.
Yeah.
And there's this giant mounting Lincoln hovering over him. Is that what you were referring to earlier?
Well, I was with that, but also thinking about how the boy reading the memorial
Yes.
is like an inspiring congressman visiting the monument of one of the presidents that's fought for freedom for all people, listening to a child of the next generation read about freedom, and a black man and his grandfather listening. Because again, I feel like there's not a lot of black people in this movie, but in one of the times that they show it is between an older black man and an older white man listening to the next generation read about freedom.
They're sitting under Lincoln together.
They're both sitting under Lincoln together. I was like that got me.
especially
That's
in that
so
time.
good.
Exactly,
Yeah.
especially in that time.
Whew.
So I was
Oh my
like, okay,
gosh.
this I was like, I really like this. This is going to be telling me something, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and you see that he's trying to measure up to Lincoln. That like Lincoln is really like the cream of the crop of all of those, big mythological historical figures.
Yeah.
And then of course, in contrast to that, we keep cutting back to Saunders. And we get the contrast between Mr. Smith's aspirational idealism and Saunders's cynical realism here. So Saunders is that every person who comes with that. She said she came with blue-eyed question marks and now just see dollar signs.
Yeah.
She's capable of so much more, but she's not allowed to progress within the system. And so she gets in on this, and this is when you texted Jason that I think you
Said
hated her,
Saunders
right?
sucks.
Yeah, because she gets in that ploy to try to get the press to trap him.
I
She
saw
just sells him out to the press and says, "Oh, well, see ya." I don't care.
saw that and I was like, he's just got to watch the rest of the movie. He's
Yep.
going to fall in love with her.
My
I was like, whoa, where are you in the movie?
Yeah.
my whole feelings towards Clarissa Saunders like had its
Takes
own
phone
character. And her first name is
Clarissa
very
knows it all.
Yeah.
her first name is important, but like my whole
is
feelings
important.
towards her had its own character arc.
That's yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, man, she sucks. I was like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, and then Derrick had said she's the most important person in the movie, and I went, all right, let's see. And then I was like, yep, 100%.
So
She's awesome.
So then I just thought of this as she represents the everyday man and Smith represents more of an idea. She's falling in love with the idea of speaking the truth and standing against what the corrupted government is normally doing.
well, she
Yeah.
wants it.
That's
Like
cool.
Yeah,
that's
she
Yeah, well,
that's-
he represents. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
He represents what she lost and what she's trying to get back.
Yeah.
And so that's why there's a scene where she gets drunk and she's
That's my second favorite scene.
yeah, where she's the guy
getting
who wants to
married.
marry. It's awesome. Capra makes such great side characters like that.
It
But
is.
Saunders, and when she's saying she gives that speech about the world like being filled with all these wonders and nature, she's echoing Mr. Smith's words. They've been working together for some time, and she talks about coming out of this tunnel, and she starts to get teary-eyed as she says that, right? Because what she's describing in that speech is Mr. Smith and what he represents, and that's what she wants back.
Yeah.
she
and-
thought it was lost.
She thought it was lost, and she still thinks it's lost at this point. And in her drunkenness, she reveals the truth to Mr. Smith of what's really going on. So to kind of get back up to a moment to how we get there is that Jefferson Smith's first moment of questioning of maybe things aren't what they seem is when the press traps him.
And he went out punching the journalist in the face. I thought that was a dream.
I thought it was too.
I was like, wait.
I still think it was. It was real.
It has to be because they would have put in the press.
Yeah, I thought he was.
Congressman goes out and punches a journalist.
Yeah.
Yeah, and them dudes were running.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't a dream.
I think it happened.
I don't think so.
I think he went out there punching the journalist.
But they like give
it's a
him
different time, Nick.
1939.
They're savage on him, but like they give him a big old wake up call
They
when,
did.
when they
do.
corner him. He thinks he's cornering them, but they corner him and
Yeah.
say, "Hey, look, this is how it is. We're the
Yes.
honest ones.
Yep, you're the guys. I don't know what they say.
I love
What they
the
say,
line
Jeff?
where he says, like, it's time, like, you guys need to tell the truth for a change. And I'm like, that line has aged really well. You know, a lot of things in this movie politically have aged really well.
Yeah.
And that conversation with the media is so interesting because you see the media trying to tear him down. They're it's just another project for them. And they don't really see him as a human being until maybe when he walks out. Maybe there's a little something there.
But he kind of gets pointed in the right direction after that.
Yeah. So there's Taylor and there's Senator Payne. So Taylor is the one who's calling the shots. And we learn that Senator Payne, who had worked with Jefferson Smith's father, that Senator Payne is under Taylor's thumb of power. He's under that grip. And so Payne and Taylor, like, they want this guy to just vote the way they want him to. But in order to kind of distract him, this is really profound here. In order to distract here, the government gives you something small that you want while they do this
Big thing.
in the background, this big thing here. So they give Jefferson something small, like, why don't you get a bill going for that boys camp?
Yep.
Trying to get this project going while they just tell him, oh, by the way, this vote here, this bill here coming up, just vote this way, all right? But really focus on your boys camp. Like, he's throwing them a bone
Yeah.
while their agenda gets pushed forward. And I think that still happens today. The government will give you that little thing that you want. Oh, sure, we'll pass this thing.
I mean, that's kind of
We'll give you your marijuana.
Workplace
We'll
will.
give you what you want in order to pacify you while we really do this here.
Yeah, and we're going to bury it in a bill full of a whole bunch of other proposals.
Oh, yeah.
And the average person isn't going to read through a whole bunch of these articles to see what is actually going down with these bills that are being passed.
Yeah.
But again, I feel like that's also part of it as well, to make a huge list of things, just like they do with when you get a new phone and you update it and stuff like that, the policies.
User agreement.
Yeah, no one's reading all that.
Yeah.
We're just trying to get to the end and say, okay, start my phone up.
Yeah.
They could literally put in there, give us your firstborn child.
Yeah,
and
literally. And
You
we
don't
were
know.
like, all right.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's a ploy. That is part of it.
Well, he's trying to ultimately give Mr. Smith a meaningful story to live by in that moment. Here, do this. This gives you meaning and purpose, right? It's a good thing what Mr. Smith wants to do, but it's a distraction.
It's small.
Yeah.
It's small, but it's good.
Controlled.
But it's controlled.
Yeah.
Yes. And, oh man, okay. We're going to start getting into this here. It's not just true of politics, though. It's true in organizations as well. It's true that whether you're working at a small nonprofit or a large corporate entity, they will find those ways to throw you a bone, to give you something. So that way you're less inclined to push back when something else. It's that almost like desensitizing, like making you kind of feel good because we're giving you something. We are looking out for you.
We're scratching your back just a little.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. So when Mr. Smith wakes up to this, when he starts to see what Saunders is saying here, you see these moments where Joe Payne, the senator, and Taylor are like, okay, he's wising up. We need to bring him in. We need to sit him down.
And even before that, when Joe Payne was talking to Taylor, he was saying the only way you're going to get out of this if you put a bullet through your mouth or you're going to tell him to get in line.
Yes,
And-
yes. Keep that pocket for later, right?
Yeah.
So Joe Payne saying he doesn't want any part of crucifying this boy, but he is going to.
He is going to.
He has no choice. Like the position he's in, he has no agency left. And so Taylor sits Jefferson Smith down to talk to him. And again, Capra's directing is so subtle, but it's amazing. The way he sits him down, it's like a scolding, like schoolmaster to a child, a student. So he sits him down, and Taylor is standing over him as this tall man who Jefferson Smith's technically taller than him, but he has to sit down. And Taylor stands over him as this hovering figure, telling him like a scolding parent, this is the way things really go. And saying, you want this? You like business? You can have this. You want to stay as a senator? You can have this.
Doesn't Joe tell him to sit down later and he says no?
Yes.
No, I will not sit down. I will not yield.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're not bigger than me.
Well, Mr. Smith stands up to him, like physically stands up to the face of that corruption. And then walks out.
No,
and then when Senator, because when he walks into that room, When he walks into that room with Taylor, he tells him to sit down, and he's complicit, and he does. Then when he goes, as you said, to Senator Payne, he's told to sit down, and he refuses. So you see the aspirational figure, part of their character arc is they're getting tested.
Yeah.
Will they hold on to their ideals and values when they're being challenged? And the truth is that what Taylor is trying to offer Jeff is this meaningful compromise. Like, you can have it. You can have meaning. You can have what you want in life, but you have to compromise. And that's what Payne is challenging Jeff Smith in. Yeah. This is what he's saying is like, you're living in a boy's world. You have no business in a man's world. Check your ideals outside the door. I compromised so I could serve these people. And this is what makes Senator Payne a very layered three-dimensional character.
When he said that, I was like, not a bad pitch. He's like, I've been doing this for 30 years helping people.
Yes. And this is the way...
The one big compromise so that he could do like 1,000 goods.
Yeah. He also says you can't count on...
Hey.
Yeah.
He also says you can't count on people to vote. That's how empires have been run since time began. It's key line because he's combating the myth that the Great Depression and the war is what led to the fracturing of the American dream. Because that's what is going around is like, is the American dream coming to end? And I think what Frank Capra is saying here is no. The American dream has always been a myth because this is how things have really been done. So I think that's a key line there. I think he's wrestling out loud with that idea because he was an advocate for the American dream.
Yeah.
But now this shows how he's developed in his thinking to where he's able to see, oh, maybe it's always been this way. And if Mr. Smith, who has had this very idealized kind of like grade school view of America, right? We all at some time kind of maybe had this perspective of the country when you're learning in 5th grade American history class and you're learning about the American Revolution and how great this country is. And this is Mr. Smith, like all of us, recognizing our own fallibility and the fallibility of the things that we hold dear. That is not just the story of us as people, but it's the story of America as a country. Because the journey of this country is also recognizing that it can be fallible, right? Despite this Declaration of Independence, despite the Bill of Rights, despite the Constitution, despite all that the Founding Fathers put down on paper that was good, the journey of America over the last 200-something years is that America is fallible. And I think we're seeing that journey play out with Mr. Smith here. And so Payne warns him that they are going to frame Jefferson Smith if he stands up. And that the very land that he wants to build the camp on, they are going to frame him for owning that land. And when Mr. Smith hears all this, he just walks out in silence. And this is where I think, for me, it's the most powerful part of the film because he's just had his worldview shattered.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what were your thoughts?
By a man he looked up to like that.
Yes. Your hero let
hurt.
you down.
Mm-hmm.
Hearing Joseph Payne say that like was a gut punch. That really hurt. I was like, how can you say that?
Yeah.
And as soon as Payne asks him, will you yield? And he says, yes. As soon as he yields, it's over.
It's
like
over,
that.
yeah.
It's a downward spiral. And he doesn't even know how to play this game.
Yeah.
Joseph Payne is just completely stone-faced about it and vicious. He'll say, I want no part in this, but the way he executes it, it's cold.
Yeah.
It is so cold. And that might have been one of the hardest portrayals I've seen in a movie.
I think I texted in the chat. I was like, I do not want to end up like Joseph Payne. I was like, I would never want to conform to anything like that. Like that, like you said, Jason, just a straight face, just the distance, the coldness, the harshness of him to look at someone that he considers a friend's son and be like, get away from me. It's like you are now an enemy to me. It's just that's sad for standing up for the truth.
Right. Well, and this is where Smith's deconstruction really sets in. It's a brief deconstruction, but it's important because for those of you out there who don't know what deconstruction is, Michael White gives this definition that deconstruction is subverting taken for granted realities or practices. So in other words, we deconstruct a lot of things. We deconstruct the narratives we have about ourselves, the dominant cultural, political discourses that we hear around us, different practices within religion and faith. Deconstruction usually starts when we're confronted with gaps, inconsistencies, and contradictions. But deconstruction can also be a path towards meaning making because we're seeing things more clearly. But if we just deconstruct for the sake of it, we're just going to tear everything down, which is why I appreciate how this movie is going to eventually rebuild something new.
Yeah.
It's going to rebuild the idea of what America could be. And it's an awesome idea. I'm going to share that in a moment.
It's the same story as The Last Jedi.
Oh my God.
It's just the same story. I'm sorry.
This is a better story.
It's the same show.
That's hilarious.
That is a rough thing.
It
Anyways.
is just as painful. The worldview got shattered.
Oh.
Anyways.
Derrick's gonna go home in a cold sweat now.
I know, right? Who would have
Just
thought?
walks out silently.
Yeah.
We got
Yep.
Oh man, that's my deconstruction is The Last Jedi. But truthfully, Jefferson, he's deconstructing why he's even there and what America is. My favorite scene in the movie, one of the most heartbreaking moments probably ever I've seen in a movie, is when you see him go back to the Lincoln Memorial. And the way Capra frames it is he's this broken silhouette and his back is turned to Lincoln. And Saunders, the every person, comes up. It's a whole new world to me. What are you going to believe? Jimmy Stewart, I mean, I think he's one of the all-time great actors, and you really get to see him in this scene where he's talking about like wanting to get away from the monuments, the words, the whole rotten show of it. So he talks about this idea of having faith in something bigger than just men and than just people themselves. There's something higher than just people's fallibility that Saunders is trying to hold on to, but also reawaken Mr. Smith back to. And it's in this moment that he calls her Clarissa. She doesn't want to be called Clarissa. She wants to be called her formal, like government, like Mrs. Saunders. That is her role, right? But Clarissa invokes this innocence of a time, it almost sounds kind of schoolgirlish, right? And the name Clarissa actually means bright.
Oh, that is sick.
So they're in that scene, they're calling forth the best of themselves.
They're calling forth
in the midst
light.
of them also sharing their deconstruction.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the greatest moments I've ever seen in a movie where two characters are meeting each other where they're at, but they're also pushing each other to grow in ways that feel very natural to the conversation. And that bright, for the name Clarissa, that bright, it's actually a double play because it's not only bright as in a light, but also like intelligent because she also knows how to beat the system.
Yeah.
Because there's something within the system that was put there, kind of like the button in the Death Star, that all of these great empires, all these great institutions, there's something put in there that in case they need to hit the self-destruct button, they can. The filibuster is that button on the Death Star.
I gotta read part of the quote that she says.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So Jefferson Smith says, well, what do you expect me to do? An honorary stooge like me against the tailors and pains and machines and lies?
Mm-hmm.
He says, your friend, Mr. Lincoln, had his tailors and pains. So did every other man who ever tried to lift his thought up off the ground. Odds against them didn't stop those men. They were fools that way. All the good that ever came into this world came from fools with faith like that.
Yeah.
You know that, Jeff. You can't quit now. Not you. And then she says a whole bunch of other awesome stuff.
Yeah. No, it's
But
great.
man,
It's great writing. Really is.
Imagine without her, nothing.
At all.
That thing would get passed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he would be lost. He'd be stuck in that deconstruction.
Mm-hmm.
I relate really heavy to this movie to get personal for a moment before we go to the filibuster. This movie is my journey with ministry.
Okay.
This was my story of following God. When I didn't grow up religious, but when I first learned about Christ and the gospel and the Bible, I was wide-eyed idealist, taking it all in, like Jefferson Smith touring Washington, D.C. I thought I had found a whole new world, and I was engulfed in it. I was wrapped up in it, and it was beautiful. I got into the world of ministry. I had those moments where things were given to, the bones were thrown to me, right? As I started to see that there were certain things happening in the background that I was suspicious of. and whether it's churches or different organizations, places that I've been a part of. And my deconstruction went on for a few years where I slowly, like, it didn't happen in a moment for me. It was very gradual where I started to see that something's not right and that, Christianity is fallible. So am I, in my faith, like, is my faith, what I believe in, is what I hold on to, fallible? And obviously it is, because we're just trying to figure this whole thing out, right? But in these moments of deconstruction, I had my Mr. Smith moment where I was really tempted. This was in 2020. I called my former youth pastor, who was really the first one to disciple me in the faith. And I called him and I said, I think I'm done. My deconstruction was so set in, I couldn't sleep at night. I had this narrative that I had made up everything, like every spiritual experience, every encounter, like with God and the Spirit, right? Everything, I was starting to convince myself I was lying. Like I was fabricating my own story. And I called him up and I said, I think I'm done. Like, I think I can't do this. Like I was like gonna collapse. And I was like, but I'm in a Christian organization and I work here and this is my income and my family goes to church and I'm on the teaching team and my wife's a Christian, and I was like about to explode. But that conversation with him was really key because he expressed his own deconstruction and his own journey he was on. And I started to realize that this person that I thought was this idealist of the faith had a lot more of that realism as well. And we started meeting each other at that point there. And then when we get to the religion episode, to my pick for that, I'll kind of share what my reconstruction looked like. But I just wanted to bring that up here because what part of my journey with the church and its fallibility that I had to work through was not to just leave and quit.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to quit like Mr. Smith. I didn't want to deal with all the BS anymore. But I relate to Mr. Smith because he chooses to fight within the institution and figure out within it, right? So just as he discovers the filibuster as a way to combat it, I too, through the biblical narrative, was able to figure out ways to combat the things that I saw that were going on that I believed were not in line with who God and who Jesus Christ is. And so I stayed within the system, within that institution of the church, and tried to navigate it. And I had my own filibuster battle. I had to fight with a certain person where I really had to try to convince them who I was, because I was attacked. My identity was attacked. I had somebody who, was over me, who I looked up to, who had basically said, like, you are a liar, like telling me this, like, you are a liar. You are deceived. Our kids, our people, and just really, really awful things that were said to me because that accusing, right? Because I was trying to push back. I was trying to stand up and challenge things for a long time. And it all reached this moment where I said, here's where this is coming from. And then my whole world was shattered. Yeah. And then I had to navigate that. And had to fight a good battle with a lot of people and trying to convince people that I wasn't insane. Yeah. So this movie's really personal for me.
That guy was like a Saunders to you.
My youth, yes, he was, because he had a lot of the Saunders feelings too.
But isn't
that I learned of?
Isn't that kind of cool that, again, the light in somebody else can help you bring the light back? Out of you.
Oh, absolutely. Mm. Yeah.
We'll get right back to the conversation in just a moment. But first, that deconstruction period that I'm describing was not easy. And there were very few people that I actually felt comfortable discussing that with. There might be a lot of people out there listening, and you might be experiencing a deconstruction yourself. It could be with politics, it could be with your faith, or it could just be things that you were once very sure of, but now you're questioning and don't know what to do with. So even though I don't advertise it much, I wanted to, just for this episode, do a special offer. If you are going through a deconstruction of some sort and you just need someone to talk that over with, just being able to have that space, then I want to invite you to schedule a free session with me. And I'll just spend an hour listening and offering anything that I can to the conversation. But the biggest thing with deconstruction is that we don't just tear down, but that we're also finding what is the narrative that we're going to build a new foundation upon. And so if that's something that you're interested in, then go ahead and click the link here in the description, in the show notes, and you could schedule that consultation for a free 1-hour session. All you have to do is schedule that. And when you're filling out that form, go ahead and just put in the notes, deconstruction conversation. And we will happily do that for an hour session instead of a 30-minute one. Again, you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to deconstruct alone. I, as a narrative practitioner, believe that you should not feel lost in your own story, and that as hard as this process might be, it might also be an opportunity at the same time to get more clarity about the story that you do want for your life going forward. So do not delay, because this will not be offered in any other episode that we have moving forward. So go ahead and check it out. And even if you're listening to this a little while after the release, please feel free to reach out and schedule that free 1-hour session as well. All right, now back to the conversation.
We get to the filibuster, and one quick thing is that they talk about him being like this David against Goliath, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Without a slingshot.
there's
Without a
actually
slingshot.
4 mythic names that Jefferson Smith is given in this movie. So when he first gets to Washington, they call him Daniel Boone. Kind of like the archetype there is the naive frontiersman.
Mm.
He doesn't know what he's getting himself into. Then on his first day in the Senate, he's called Daniel in the lion's den, basically where you're doomed to die. The odds are stacked against you, right? And you don't know really how to navigate it. Then he becomes Don Quixote, the plucky adventurer.
Quixote.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Thanks, phone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Phone
phone
book.
book.
It's my pleasure.
He becomes he becomes the Don Quixote figure when
Quixote.
he becomes
Going back and
that
forth.
figure when he first is going to challenge Payne in the Senate, and then Payne shuts him down. Now he's David. So he goes from Daniel Boone to Daniel in the lion's den to Don Quixote to David against Goliath. So I just thought that was awesome.
Yeah, it's
that
really
you
dope.
see
It
his
is really
character
cool,
arc
yeah.
through those 4 mythic figures.
Yeah, I'll start with the letter D.
Yeah,
Yeah.
coincidentally, right? Or maybe intentionally, I don't know. But anyway, so what do you guys think of the whole filibuster like sequence? It is the most famous part of the film.
So filibuster, can you explain that?
So the filibuster is basically the right that you have to talk so that people will listen and you don't have to yield the floor. And it's usually only used as a last desperate measure. And fun fact, there is a certain political party whom I will not name that wants to kill the filibuster and rid it because it
No
is
way.
the last thing in the system that can shut things down.
Last thing
And
in the system.
and I'm sure my viewers out there can go look up which political party that is. So, which is interesting because I do think that different political parties have had different perspectives on this film over time. Right now, there's one political party that this is their film, and there's another that is threatened by what this film says. That's all I'm going to say. Anyways, so what do you guys think of this whole sequence where Mr. Smith he has the floor, he's not yielding the floor, and
I think the aspect that grasped me more was outside of the courtroom when all the kids are gaining together to actually put out the real news.
Yes.
But the system, the corrupt system, is drowning it out with this fake news and this slander news. They even got false documents and records against this man to
Yes.
still try to prove their point. And how often do we still see stuff like that?
Yes.
All of it is just drowned out. The truth is drowned out. They were kicking kids.
Okay,
They-
so one of the darkest moments I think ever,
They ran the kids off.
they ran the kid on the road.
and then kicked their little thing afterwards.
now,
Like, bro, like
now this is
that's
1939, so I wouldn't expect them to show the kids dying.
They hit kids
But
with
the
a
But-
they hit some kid with a car, and that kid
They hit kids with a car in this
Yeah.
movie. That's what I texted you about. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
there's something really dark in this
But
movie.
the fact that if again we're looking at, or how I look at it, if the children are the real people in society,
The representation of that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
representation of that, the corrupt system will do anything
Mhm.
to silence the truth.
It will stoop to that
It will
level.
stoop to that level, and it's just like, wow, that's
Yeah.
crazy. But again, it hits home.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
There's the intercutting, some of the, again, fantastic editing here between what's happening on the floor and what's happening outside. And you're seeing this tension build as you're hoping that while Mr. Smith is trying to convince the Senate, the ordinary common people out there are going to see. And you think that that's where Capra's going, is that the common man is going to come and rally Mr. Smith, right? And one other thing before that is that Mr. Smith is trying to appeal to these senators through the foundational writings, through these ideas, right? So the Constitution and the Bible, those are the two texts that he's going back to and saying, this is what we've lost. And I think it's Capra saying to America, like, this is where, you know, we're drifting from, right? This is what we've lost. He then appeals to, as the boys are getting run off, right? He's also appealing to the senators once being boys. They were once the little people. They were once the common man. They were once innocent here. And you see what they've become. They've become the Taylors. They've become the ones shutting them down now.
Until he yelled or something like that.
He whistles and he goes, I just want to make sure you guys
it's
all
funny.
still
There's
have
great
faces.
comedy too.
Yeah.
To speak for a full day, you got to have something to say. But what does he talk about? He goes through, does he go through, I can't remember what else, the Declaration of Independence. He is full of the American values that he looked up to. And it's like, well, that was a waste of time. No, it wasn't, because that is what is in his heart that drives him forward.
That
he
drives him forward, even if it doesn't do anything for them.
Right.
But it turns them around. At one point, they turn around.
They're listening to him. They're starting to listen to him, and like, because he's tugging at the hearts of all these people. And he's not just one man. But one man alone standing against all these people. And they're like, he's not doing this for his own interest anymore.
Exactly.
Right.
Like, no one can just do this that has a self-interest in it. And he's got Saunders, Clarissa, he's got Saunders up there helping him out.
Yeah.
He can't do it without her at all. And she's got the press now on his side, and they're trying to get it out. But Taylor is pulling out all the stops, blocking all information, turning everyone
and fun
against
fact,
them.
that really is Jimmy Stewart's voice being that hoarse, because they filmed the scene for over days and days and days, and his voice really was that worn out. You see, the fight has exhausted him.
Yes.
And he's been fighting from the letter and trying to appeal to the heart through that. Maybe trying to appeal maybe a bit to the head, but okay.
So I'm gonna get to the end. So there's a point where they bring in all the the letters.
Would you really like to hear what the people of your town think?
The people have said,
and this is the moment where you think Capra's gonna like save the day, but go ahead, Jason.
No, well, you think he's gonna break at this moment, and I'm like, no, he's done.
So because he sees all the letters,
and he's searching for one that's for him.
Yep.
And he finds none, and he looks at Joseph Payne. I think he looks at Joseph Payne.
Well, first he looks at the head guy, and he gives him like that nod, like keep going, like don't give up.
Yeah,
that smile.
Well, he looks at Joseph Payne, and he figures it out.
Yes,
he realizes
he does.
This fight isn't against Taylor.
Yeah,
it's not against the press. It's not against anyone. He realizes this fight's against you.
Yes,
it's me and you.
Yes,
and it's your conscience. And I realize the floodgates of justice and truth hinge on one man's repentance right now.
Yes.
One
right.
man who is part of the system.
You're a genius.
Yeah,
that's great. Keep going.
Yeah.
who knows everything and didn't start out that way. He started out for the little people, for the, say it guys.
Every man?
No, for the causes we're fighting for, the lost causes.
I guess this is just another lost cause,
a
Mr.
lost
Payne.
cause. And I knew that point was coming. And when he smiled, I'm like, oh, he's going to do it. He's going to do it. He's going to hit him. And Joseph Payne, in his heart, it's been stressed all the way up to this point because he knew it was wrong. And it breaks.
Well,
and he goes to shoot himself.
Okay, wait, hold on. Before we get there, though. So, like, he goes, Jason.
Joe's so ready to give to, and then he goes to shoot himself.
Really beautifully said, Jason, because he goes from the letter, appealing with the letter to the spirit.
Yeah, to Joe's spirit.
Yeah. And so he
Pat-
talks about
Pat
like
Bateman.
fighting for the
Joe.
lost causes, one simple rule, love thy neighbor. And then he gives his I'm not licked yet speech. Now, this is key here. The very last line that Jefferson Smith utters is what? You guys know? It's the very last line in the movie he utters. Somebody will listen to me. Somebody. He collapses. And Payne is that one man who
that
listens.
Yeah.
Yep.
But the
I thought he
truth
was
is
gonna-
too much to bear.
I
that
thought he died.
Yeah.
Or I was
Well, here's the thing.
I was like, oh no, is he dead? He was just fainted.
I
Thank
think
God.
I think it's 1939. I don't think Capra would kill him. I think it would be too dark for that time.
I'm glad he didn't.
But
I'm glad he didn't.
But at the same time, though, he had a lot more hopeful of an ending for Smith, but then it was cut. This ending here, I think, is really powerful because Jefferson Smith never gets back up. He never wakes up to see the victory that he won.
Yeah.
The fight exhausted him so much so, but yet the freedom that came from it is for everybody else. But I think Capra is very intentional. They try to revive him and he doesn't wake up. I think he is trying to say that if you really want to fight the system, you have to provoke the man of, like exactly what you said, you have to provoke the conscience of one man who could be willing to tell the truth. But that doesn't mean that you are going to come out of it alive.
Yeah.
And this is what Senator Joseph Payne says as they wrestle the gun away from him. Let me go. I'm not fit to be a senator. I'm not fit to live. Expel me, not him. Willardam is a fraud. It's a crime against the people who sent me here, and I've committed it. Every word that boy said is truth. Every word about Taylor, of me, and graft, and the rotten political corruption of my state. Every word of it is true. I'm not fit for office. I'm not fit for any place of honor or trust. Expel me, not that boy.
Yeah.
That was his confession.
Yeah.
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 And his
That was his confession.
And
that's how it ends.
yes,
Yeah.
but from that pivotal moment, now things can move forward. Because now, something is gone, and that's the breach that was needed. He could not win against that machine.
Yeah.
That was his fight, was against the spirit and the conscience of one man who needed to repent and expose what was going on. Someone on the inside.
And it's kind of the opposite of They Live, which we'll talk about, is that They Live is a story about someone from the outside taking the system down.
Yeah.
This is a story of the system being brought down from within.
No one is repenting and they live.
Right. But I do think that we don't see at the end of this movie Taylor actually getting brought down, which I think is also intentional. Capra is not showing that everything works out.
open-ended.
It's not It's a Wonderful Life,
Yep.
which is his other most famous movie. It's not that where everything works out and all justice is dealt out. It just simply ends with the possibility that there's hope on the horizon and a message to the audience that you have to fight for your happy ending.
Yeah.
So, any final thoughts?
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Did this movie?
Yeah, no, that was awesome.
Was this movie like? How does it kind of land for you? Like now that we've kind of talked about it.
I don't know. I just took all that in. That was just really good.
That
That's all I
repentance
got.
bit is
Sorry.
really good.
Yeah.
That repentance part.
I'll end with this quote here from Frank Capra, and this is one of the reasons why I really love him as a filmmaker. Is this mentality here? He says, "When I see a crowd, I see a collection of free individuals, each a unique person, each a king or a queen, each a story that would fill a book, each an island of human dignity." So that's all I got. So thank you guys for this conversation and for indulging me in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. We got a lot more to come with politics, so stay tuned. And until next time,
The man wants the truth. What is the truth?
Thank you for listening to the Live a Meaningful Story podcast, produced by All Things Narrative. If you'd like to learn more about our coaching, workshops, events, please check out allthingsnarrative.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at All Things Narrative. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and tune in next time as we continue exploring the stories we love and the stories we live. Take care.